are bottom of the Smash Mountain. I would like to thank all my Patreon supporters at patreon.com/bsmpod for continuing to support me in what I'm doing. Big special shout outs to my senior producers. We have Ventus Official and my mom and dad. Love y'all. Thank you for the support. Thank you everyone for tuning in for another episode. We're back to Melee related things. For those of you who follow on the podcast regularly, I've kind of been delving into more nostalgic games. There's Naruto Super Clash of Ninja modifications I've been getting into. However, I got to watch a really fun tournament this past weekend, and I don't always lead with, oh wow, that was such a cool tournament, let me try to get anyone or everyone on from the tournament. But you, Chandler, Ohan, who's joining us today, just had super awesome vibes when talking with Josh Man after top 8 for Melee was over to close out the broadcast and talking. I go, well, this is such a cool present. So I'm very excited to have you on, Ohan. You are the head tournament organizer for Tipped Off 14, which just happened this past weekend. We'll get into that. We'll get into your story and everything. But first of all, thank you for joining me. Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for having me. Josh Man's the ultra homie. He stayed with me for over a week. Actually, he flew in the Monday prior. So great guy, and yeah, super happy to wrap up the event with him.
When you think about your because you're a student at KSU, Kennesaw State University, when you think about all the accomplishments that you've done so far, and you're not going to school for organizing tournaments, I'm pretty sure. I think I saw on Twitter it was for economics. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I'm a senior now. I'm an economics major at KSU. It's definitely weird because like I walked around the campus a bit yesterday actually while we were kind of like waiting to pick up CRTs, and I'm like, oh, this is like the dorm room I stayed in like when I first moved here, and there's the dining hall and all the like tournaments, even like the small like 10-person locals we've had in that building. And we kind of like made a joke about it where it's like, our local like, O2 players played on like the same stage that eventually like housed Mango and Zane, right? And it's a very like weird surreal feeling.
Because and when you think about the accomplishments that you've had in your collegiate career, there we go. That's the word I wanted. It does this top it, or was there just a super sick? You had this 12-page paper due, and the night before you got started on it and you finished it and you got a 100. I mean, where do you think this ranks in a grand scale of all of your experiences at KSU?
This definitely is up there. If it's not number one, it's definitely very close. I mean, it was a Herculean effort. Like so many people got involved. It was about 8 months of prep on my end for this tournament. So yeah, better half of a year, and it was just so like amazing to watch it all fall into place this past weekend. And it sounds like everybody had a great time. So we're super duper happy with that.
It does feel almost impossible to organize a tournament the night before. I was just thinking about that when as soon as I said night before with a research paper, I thought, what if we try to organize a tournament like saying the next day it's going to happen? But that would only be possible for online. That would only be if Nintendo did something stupid and we all kind of, did like a 5 days of Melee thing. That entire broadcast happened within 3 weeks, if I recall correctly, and that's about as fast as we could turn something around. Having all those bracket, having the content, having the constant streaming, 24 hours, back to back days, 5 days literally straight. So night before, you'd barely be able to get it off of the ground. But I want to definitely ask you more questions about Tipped Off 14, but we don't start here. There's an 8-month literal preparation process, but there's also a big history behind the name Tipped Off. So I don't know how well educated you are with the first one happenings or anything, but I think the best way to ramp up to it a little bit is to talk about you specifically. So Ohan, how did you get into Melee?
So I actually went to high school in Savannah, Georgia, which is, for those of you that don't know the location, like pretty close to the South Carolina border. It's in southern Georgia. And there was not a really huge Melee scene down there. I started off playing Project M when I was in high school, and I ran my first local for Project M. It was like a less than 20-person tournament, probably in around like late, I think it was about summer to late 2014. And from there, I connected with what was then the Eagle Smash guys. They were over at Georgia Southern University, and I kind of just kept playing Project M and didn't really move into Melee until I went to college in about 2017 in the Atlanta area and at KSU. And then the first tournament I actually worked on was Tipped Off 12. I, was brought on to work with Full Metal on that one and like run some pools and stuff like that. Nothing too crazy, but that was like my first introduction into like the greater Melee scene culture for sure.
And when you think about so it sounds like you got started on playing competitive pretty young. And were you just drawn in by the game and then stuck around because of the community? Because that seems to be a common thread. You go there to a tournament to play because you go, the game is so sick. I'm really good at it. I want to prove that to other people, or a variation of that. And then once you get humbled, like me, of course, and many other people, what's the reason to stick around? Is it to get better, or is it because, oh, everyone here is really cool and awesome? I mean, what would you say kept you around and kept you like getting more and more involved? And like you said, it Tipped Off 12, starting to help out with running pools and actually helping with behind the scenes stuff as compared to just attending the tournament.
So when I was in high school, it was a very interesting dynamic because a lot of the people at my high school played, right? Like we'd play every day, like during, band class or something, or, on the weekends, like we'd hang out at somebody's house. But then you all like split up and you go to college and like, you don't know anybody. Like I didn't have any family in the Atlanta area. I didn't know any like of my friends that went to my college. So, hooking up with like my local Melee scene was kind of a way to like remake connections with those people. And like some of those people, I've been in their wedding now. Like, they're friends for, the rest of my life. They're my best friends. And it's very interesting how like that kind of brought me together to a whole new group of people who now I'm super close with, right? So I definitely think it's the community aspect of it that kind of like made me level up with my like love and appreciation for Melee for sure.
Even though you got started on P, but no, I was not P plus. Sorry, I would
Mhm.
keep wanting to say P plus when I think of it retrospectively, but it's PM. A lot of people don't even say P plus; they just still call it PM.
Yeah.
But you had a P plus bracket, a PM bracket here at Tipped Off 14. Was that important to you to make sure that that was included in a tournament that you have your name attached to?
It definitely was important because that's something that I pay, homage to as far as my origins. There was a time in Georgia Melee, or rather in Georgia Smash, when Project M was probably bigger than Georgia Melee. Like it was just huge. There were so many like super cracked players in the state. But of course, once the whole thing happened, when like you couldn't stream it on like Twitch anymore, and like you really none of the big tournaments were having it like on the stream, it kind of just fell off. And I think a lot of people then returned to Melee who maybe otherwise would still be playing Project M to this day.
So you were around when it was really blowing up, and Armada, Mewtwo King, those kind of players are
Mhm.
playing PM. And the people that I've talked to that were around during that time, because my introduction to competitive Smash was in 2006, but I have not been super involved until closer to 2018. And when I say that, I started following people on Twitter. I started
Mhm.
watching live tournaments in 2018. But then when starting this podcast a couple years ago, I'm just kind of like eat, breathe, sleep Melee. So the idea there being, when you were around at that time and you were talking about being bigger than Melee, or bigger than, well, certainly bigger than Brawl. I mean, Brawl's metagame, I don't want to say was solid by 2012 and 2013, 2014, but let's just say that the Brawl enthusiasts were probably ready for Smash 4 for the Wii U
For sure.
to come out. But what was your favorite part about that timeline? Because you were a new player at that point. Did you think, I don't know, what was your imagination taking you to, like, kind of the future? Did you think, when the next Smash games that comes out, we'll just mod that up too? This is like super awesome. This is better than anything that Sakurai and his team put out. What was your feelings around PM during that time? I just want to capture that, if you don't mind going
For sure,
back.
yes. So for one, I think PM was widely accessible. At that point in like Melee's lifespan, like there wasn't like Slippy, where now every tournament at Tipped Off, for example, every setup was just Project Slippy on a Wii.
Hmm.
Back then, like you still had to have a GameCube, you had to have the memory card with everything unlocked, you had to have the disc, where back then, even with PM, you could just easily get it downloaded on any Wii because of course they emulated it. Um, but there's also a lot of content about it, and I think that's what really hurt PM, at least in my eyes, for me personally, was I could go like every week and like watch Xanadu, like Pink Fresh, or watch like all of these tournaments. Like well, I'll never forget. I believe it's Low Tier City 2, which had Me Too King Grand Finals. Amazing, amazing tournament. And there's just constantly stuff happening for PM. But then, of course, like, when it got nuked from the internet, basically that erasure, there was a huge lack of content. So for me, for someone who didn't really have tournaments in my local area, like that's all I had was being able to like watch content, like view content. And there's just so much PM content at that time to consume. I think that was just massive for me as like a player to like better enjoy and like binge basically on like that experience.
And that kind of makes me think, and I have this bad habit of going off topic. It makes me think of how other platform fighters have failed. I mean, I don't want to say failed largely and that they're not commercial successes or profitable or whatever. When I say fail, I mean dethroning Smash, and in particular dethroning Melee. You get this new platform fighter like Multiverses or Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl in recent times, and before that it was other things. But in recent times, I've when paying attention, everybody starts playing it, everybody starts making videos about it. We're all kind of interested in it, and then somebody eventually says, "It's not Melee, or it's not Ultimate." I mean, Void was probably the best Nasby player, just casually.
Oh yeah, no, I
Void
mean
was
he was cracked.
so cracked. But then you go back to Ultimate, so it kind of makes me think of that in the same way that PM had its time in the light, and then being shadow banned essentially just caused it to go down south really fast. So do you think that by having this at Tip Top 14 and seeing it at other majors as a shadow major and everything, and then we're all nowadays in the timeline of we don't really care or want to even think about what Nintendo wants. We're all just trying to do our own thing and survive in the quote unquote dying esports landscape. We're just super happy to have P plus around. And do you think there's like comeback potential, or do you always think that shadow major is kind of like the closest it can get from your standpoint?
I think it's definitely more realistic now than it perhaps was last year. I think last year there was a huge thing with the circuits basically,
Right.
and how you didn't want to have P plus, basically at your tournament out of like fear that the Nintendo approved like circuits or whatever like wouldn't pick you, right? It's kind of a similar thing with like frozen Pokemon versus like unfrozen Pokemon
Hmm.
and like other tournament mods basically. They were very like frowned upon and like taboo. It almost felt like so I think now seeing as how like they're kind of out of the picture, there's like a much better path forward for like Project Plus to like at least be at the venue and like at the event and have like that side bracket, which I think we got like 65 64 people, which is it's a great turnout for that game. And it's always been such an important part of Tipped Off history. Tipped Off 11 is like one of the top 10 biggest Project M like prize pools of all time, I think. Like the tournament was just insanely stacked for Project M back then. So we're super duper happy we got to bring that back and kind of help out that community how we could.
With Tipped Off 14 starting to go into it in the post-COVID era, you would consider yourself more of a pure TO and not so much of a player anymore, trying to go for deep bracket runs.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think our scene specifically needed a lot of guidance out of like the COVID era, and it wasn't just me. There were a bunch of great people that helped with that, like Ostentatious, who's a local Georgia TO and community member, S Deems, who's a phenomenal player. If you saw him at Tipped Off, he beat the Swooper. That guy's cracked. But no, like there's a bunch of people, and I think that's kind of I found a different role coming out of it in a way where I really wanted to kind of do something more for our community, and I believe that at least some way we delivered on that this past weekend. So.
When you were the person who said, "Oh, okay, well, we got to talk about the last Tipped Off event that happened." Was that it wasn't called Tipped Off 13, it was called something else, wasn't it?
Yes, it was Tipped Off Reunion, which was kind of different because we kind of had different goals in that Tipped Off versus this Tipped Off. So this Tipped Off, was the resurgence, right? We wanted to like get our name out there. We wanted to, go really hard and just work so hard at it. But last one, it was mainly just that like a lot of the scenes, especially in the Southeast, hadn't seen each other in a long time because of COVID, because Tipped Off used to kind of be sacred almost in the fact that Atlanta was like in the middle of all these regions, right?
Right.
Like, Orlando would come up, like Nashville would come down, North Carolina would come down. And even after Tipped Off stopped being a thing, like we'd still see all these states at something like DreamHack, right? Or like at MomoCon. But because MomoCon didn't have Melee anymore and DreamHack
Hmm.
Atlanta didn't run in 2020 and 2021, we kind of felt like tipped off like we needed to do something right to get everybody together and just like having a good time and like vibing again, right? And I think we had a great goal. Like we had amazing regional representation at the last one. We did like crew battles. It was super duper hype. But yeah, a little bit different than the event we ended up running this year.
What was your role in Tipped Off Reunion?
I was the head organizer of that tipped off as well. Yep. So I also did all the planning and everything for that one.
Nice execution. That was a 1 day event, or was it a 2 day event?
That was also a 2 day event. Yep.
And you did the 48-hour thing as you did this year, or
Yeah.
you tell
Yeah. It
me.
was it's not fun. Yeah. It's pretty brutal. That's where I perfected the strategy that Josh Man talked about, where I like wean myself off sleep, basically. It's definitely not fun, but it gets the job done. So I'm in my early 20s, so I got a few good years left in me, I guess. So
I'm feeling it at 27. I had a brutal travel to Battle of BC in Vancouver and a brutal travel back. And I just thought to myself, why am I doing this? And it's because if you want a reasonable flying time of departure and arriving and traveling, you need to pay many $100s more. Or in your case, you're doing that because you want to have it be a 24-hour venue. That was the aim for Tipped Off 14 at the very least. You wanted the venue
for sure.
for each day to be 24 hours, and they said somebody needs to be here. Well, you specifically, Ohan, need to be there. And you said, you think I won't stay up for 48 plus hours? You think I won't do that? So was that basically the idea behind, like, you wanted that to be a thing for everyone to have a 24-hour venue? That was your sacrifice there?
Yeah, so 24-hour venues are nice for a few reasons. Like for one, there's the obvious appeal of like people can just game throughout the night, right? There's always people that just are there till like 5, 6 a.m., like money matching in teams or something like that. But it also helps a lot as far as like putting my mind at ease for like scheduling reasons. Like I'm not having to worry like, oh well, we have to be out of here at midnight and like our pools are like running 1 hour behind or something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
knowing that we have infinite time to take the tournament down from like 350 to 32 on Saturday is just like such a stress relief off my shoulders, you know?
Yeah, so for Battle BC, they're in a very nice venue, but it's like we need to be out of here fast because I think it was the venue was closing it either at 10 o'clock local time or maybe it was 11, but the stream I think had to be done before 9, like stuff like that. And I didn't necessarily mind it. The only thing that I got a little annoyed at was the idea of, if I want to be in the venue as soon as it opens the next morning, there's always going to be a line for security and
For sure.
blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But then I said, well, what if I just don't go when the venue opens, because I didn't actually participate in bracket at Battle BC5 specifically, so I won that one. But yes, like you said, the 24-hour venue, they had it be 24-hour at Pound 2022, and I remember leaving at the end of the night. It was maybe 11 o'clock, and I see Laud just playing against the CPU, just kind of grinding out, I guess, a situation, or just like practicing DI, or like the computer's DI or whatever. And he was telling me, yeah, I'm gonna be here at least until 3 in the morning. I want to get some money matches in. Like, what? You're insane. So what was your favorite little storyline that came from Tipped Off 14 AM friendlies and money matches and doubles?
So we have two legendary old school Georgia players. Their tags are Flamin' Roy and Nika Boy. Goated players. They're brothers, and they historically always show up whenever we host 24-hour tournaments in the wee hours of the morning to money match people in doubles. Right? They don't enter the tournament. They don't enter doubles at the tournament even. They just show up to money match people and just trash them in the wee hours of the morning. It's just an amazing experience. You know, it's like the fog machine, like the doors fly open. You know, you cue the dramatic music. It's a super duper sick feeling when they're in the venue. Everybody's gotta like watch out. You know.
And it would be way too early or way too late for Cody and J-Move to be there, who won doubles this weekend.
Exactly. Yeah.
Eerily similar to Battle BC5. Sorry to keep bringing that up, but it was Amsa and Axe, who were Team Ecstatic, who were able to get two grands on the winner side. And it's just like, no, please. But Cody and J-Mook are just really, really good. We'll talk more about the bracket. I'm sorry, I always get ahead of myself. I want to hear about how this event goes from, because as a northeasterner, I'm from PA, so I might have heard Tipped Off. It may have been somewhere in my conscious brain somewhere, but I don't think that I understood how big this event was going to be until a coin box happened a couple months ago. Cody wins as per usual, and Hungrybox is saying, all right, what are your next upcoming tournaments, Cody? And He goes, oh, okay, I'm going to Battle BC. I'm going to this. I'm going to Tipped Off. And I go, Tipped Off, wait, what? And Cody's like, but you're going to Tipped Off, right? Because everybody's going to Tipped Off. And I go, but wait, hold on, what? And Hungrybox says, yeah, I'm going to DreamHack that same weekend, actually. And I thought, wait, if everyone's going to this other event that Hungrybox is not going to, that could be super duper fun. And I like watching Hungrybox, but I also know that when he's not in the bracket, people like Spark and Jmook have a better chance of going farther. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this is going to be really cool, but everyone's going to that. And then sure enough, look at it, go, oh, yes, everybody is going to that. And that takes a lot of effort on your part. So I'm interested in hearing, after Tipped Off Reunion, was the idea of let's make this a super regional, turn it into a major because we can get top player attendance. What was the angle for you? How did you go about to try to make that happen? Because whatever you did, you succeeded.
Yeah, so it really wasn't something where we had like a game plan and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get like these specific people. We kind of just took it one step at a time and it snowballed a lot actually. So, at the start we wanted to, of course, fly out some top players. We have to book the venue about 8 months out, so we were very, very careful with like making sure we didn't get the same weekend as any other big tournaments or like
Yeah.
something like that. Which is always a challenge when you have to book events 8 months out, right? Because some things don't become public knowledge until about maybe a month or two out. So for me as like a grassroots TO, I'm not always like in the know about say like when Smash Summit is, right? So luckily I was able to connect and kind of make sure we got that all taken care of. But we reached out to JMook, we reached out to Axe. They were the first two players to confirm for Tipped Off, and that was super amazing. And then after that, we kind of just snowballed from there. We started gaining a lot of momentum. Every new player that signed up, is another like Twitter post I got to spam on the internet, basically. And we just kind of kept snowballing from there. I mean, there's really nothing special to it. We had a policy where we said we never wanted anyone to not be able to attend Tipped Off because of money reasons, right? So we, I believe, in the end, offered over 12 or $13,000 worth of financial aid to players, whether it's like buying their flights or their hotels or their food or something like that. So we wanted to make sure everybody that wanted to come to the tournament was able to come to it.
Well, how do you justify that from a cost perspective? Was it because the venue's easier to book as a student? Or you tell me, was this a profitable event? You can either say yes or no, or I don't want to answer.
I mean, the event is right now like pretty close to break even. Like we're slightly in the red, but we kind of haven't done all the money on it yet.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, like it's not about making money. That's always been our policy. If we want to make money, like we're in the wrong business,
That
right?
is
Like we should
true.
we should go do something else.
But just no
Yeah,
life
I mean,
crippling debt, please. I think that
yeah, yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
fair for TOs to not go into life crippling
That
debt.
that is
Jeez.
very fair. So I'm not sure how much you know of the Tipped Off history, but prior to Tipped Off 13, a gentleman named Full Metal ran the series, and Tipped Off 12 in 2017 was the last one that he ran, and he lost over $20,000 and had to sell his house
See,
because
that's what
of
I'm
the losses from
saying.
that tournament. Yeah,
That's so
which
unfortunate.
yeah, which is tragic. So we of course are always very careful to make sure that we take care of ourselves and take care of the people around us, like financially. But we looked at a lot from a cost perspective, right? Because of course we based all the projections of our budget off of a certain number, and we of course exceeded that number because the event grew to sizes that we didn't even imagine at the start. Um, and it was basically every time we got those few extra dollars, like we were looking to spend it. We're like, okay, we can see if this player wants to come, or maybe we can like we booked an entire like Six Flags trip with all the players that like flew out, so everybody went to Six Flags. And like I said, it's just really not about like making money for us. It's we wanted everybody to have a good time. We want everybody to experience it. Convince them like maybe sweeten the deal for them to come out a bit. But it's also just a way that I personally kind of feel like funds should be distributed as far as like top player assistance. Like, the alternative to this would have been just to like slap a $10,000 pop bonus on there, right? And then say, hey, there's a 10K pop bonus. You guys sign up, figure it out. But I like kind of like doing it the former way because I think it's more risk adverse. Because say you have like the number one seed player of the tournament who doesn't have a sponsor and he buys his plane ticket, comes out and gets 13th and doesn't get a payout, right? He's now feeling ultra bad because he's bought the plane ticket, he bought a hotel, etc. But in this system, like everybody's taken care of. Like we covered all of Cody's expenses, so he doesn't like lose anything. He's still obviously not happy at his performance, but he's not having to suffer financial hardship because he just wasn't his weekend, basically.
Right. That would have been really, really bad for Cody
Hmm.
because you think somebody who wins the coin box specifically, That's recent news on that. Anyway, there's someone who
Yeah.
basically you could write down, I win an online bi-weekly tournament every single time and make most money. And then there'd be the occasional performance of just not even getting top eight, just totally finishing at congratulations on ninth place, you get $0. That would have been really unfortunate for Cody in particular. Such a tricky thing that there is no one who wants to sponsor one of our best, if not our best player, for
Yeah.
whatever reason. It is tricky. So I like the philosophy how you went into that, and you were able to succeed in like I know that tournaments that have higher level players going, they tend to talk to other higher level players saying, I'm going to this. Oh, you're going to Atlanta when the weather's warm. Well, and not that you were directly in Atlanta. It's like a 24-mile difference, but yeah, close enough. Atlanta's easy to fly to, or easier than say to Lancaster where I'm in.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
you have a nice location kind of a thing going on. And then when December happened, when BTS announced their shutdown, when I guess all of esports started to tank. I mean, I think almost on a weekly basis we hear something to the effect of doing all of this stuff, streaming or esports or combination of everything is going to be harder to do from now on from a financial perspective or otherwise. So when you're planning this 8 months out, BTS was still around, the circuits were still happening, and you have to think about, oh, are we going to have Pokemon Stadium frozen or not? I mean, we have to have it frozen, right? But now, after December, you go, oh, yeah, we're freezing that, super freezing that. We are definitely freezing that 1000%. And then when BTS goes down, it's like, oh my gosh. When you're seeing all of this stuff and then people starting to go, oh, you're still doing your tournament. Oh, you'll help me get there. Okay, well, I'll come. Like, I mean, even players like KJH and Nunn, like, and these are not players that have attended every single tournament this year, but they were at your event. I mean, you talked about it snowballing, but do you think? I don't want you to say we have to give credit to like the downfall of others. I don't want to phrase it like that, but how much do you think the current climate of things allowed you to be able to make the maneuverings that you did?
It's definitely a massive factor. I can't discount it at all. That even say last year, if I had tipped off, everything was the same, and it was on a weekend by itself. I'm just competing with a lot more tournaments, right? There may be something the weekend before and the weekend after that are essentially mandatory to go to because of like circuit points and like the promised prize pools and something like that. Um, so I definitely think it's a huge factor that overall there are just less tournaments. Like I think so far this year, tipped off is the fifth major that's happened, so it's not a lot compared to the previous calendar year. And I do think that's a huge part of it. So I'm of course not happy that say like BTS and VGBC and all them are gone. Like I definitely think there's room for everybody in the Smash community to run tournaments and fulfill their dreams. But as far as getting people to my event specifically, I mean, of course it helped people come out because there were just fewer alternatives.
So when we are the week of Josh Man, one of the first top players to arrive, everything, what's going through your mind the Monday before, other than Josh Man's coming over today? I mean, what's going through your mind the Monday before tipped off?
So Monday before, so my whole goal is I knew once Joshman was in, I mean that guy's wild. We were gonna be, vibing. I knew that everything basically had to be done by Monday. But in the week prior, there was a lot of just like going over all my plans, like making sure I had everything squared away. Because we had like a lot of backup plans made. Like I had two alternative venues booked in case like tragedy struck and like that venue just had some issues like in case I had an Apex 2015 situation.
Or
So it was
half the
like
power
going
went out, no big deal.
half the power went out, yeah.
We'll get to
um
that.
yeah, it's basically just going over all my stuff, like double checking flight times, like communicating with people the last few details, or if there are like last minute sponsors we were getting on board. But luckily by the time Josh Man was in my house, like 98% of all the work was done, which was pretty great.
Is your favorite part of all of this planning the tournament or executing the tournament?
It's definitely twofold. So planning the tournament is definitely much less stressful. Because you can do it over the course of 8 months, just like piece by piece, little
Chip
bit by
away,
day.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's certain magic in executing it too, like being awake for 48 plus hours, like moving CRTs, having the power go out, like that's it's never fun. It's never fun, but there's some good moments, especially at the end, right? Like I always talk about how Saturday is like the low point, right? Like Saturday, like it's all day, like so many people are out of the tournament, like they could be upset, they underperformed, whatever. Things maybe run behind. So there's a pretty big low on Saturday, I feel like, as far as like the vibe. But then Sunday, it's just like complete 180. Like people are, upsetting people and like the crowd's going crazy. Like it's definitely just an amazing, like electric feeling going off like the end of a top eight, especially that top eight and like how it turned out, of course.
Yes, turned out top eight turned out to be amazing. So talk to me about did the venue opened up in the morning of Saturday? It didn't open up at like midnight Saturday morning, like Friday night. Like show up in line. When did it open up officially for business open?
So as far as how the venue works is the venue is a public building, so we can technically show up whenever. But as far as our planning, we got permission to move the table, start setting up the stream around 5 p.m. the Friday prior. But that was only until 10 p.m. We didn't have the building overnight, so we did as much as we could between 5 and 10 the night prior. And then we only got into the venue at around 9 a.m. on Saturday, and then the doors opened to the public at 10 a.m. So we had one last hour to finalize. We did like a volunteer meeting. I made sure everyone was on board and like logged into the laptops and stuff like that. And then immediately after that, we sent it and we, got the show on the road.
Oh, you had everybody doing sorry, the pool captains doing the bracket just live on the spot with laptops.
Yeah, yeah. So we had them do
That's
it with
what I'm
laptops.
saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, Genesis 9 did paper brackets. That's okay, but also laptops. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a venue thing. I've also done paper brackets before at tournaments. We invested the money. We thought it'd make things more efficient. We have fiber internet at KSU, so we're just like, hey, like, we might as well do it if
Well,
we can, right?
when did you decide that streaming on Mango and Cody Stream was the way? Because there's a couple of different options. BTS's channel still seems to be up, although they had an ultimate tournament on this past weekend, but
Mhm.
or the I don't want to say the tipped off stream, but you understand what I'm saying. It wasn't that
For sure, yeah.
tipped off has always been on Mango and Cody's stream. So when did that happen, and what was the big reason for you? Just simply grease the wheels kind of a thing.
I mean, I learned a lot during this tipped off cycle and the last one as well, and kind of just tournaments in general. We of course looked into like BTS and stuff like that, but because of Crown, like we really couldn't make it work, unfortunately, this go around. But we knew we wanted tipped off in front of more eyes than it basically had ever have been, in the
Mm-hmm.
past. So we were looking into like stream channels and stuff like that. We talked to Cody because Cody, of course, right now without a sponsor, like that helps him out a ton, right? And we wanted to make sure that, not only is he giving us something, but we're also providing some value to him and hopefully getting him some more traction off of it. Mango's channel was pretty interesting where with Mango, we never really even asked Mango to come to the tournament. We thought there was no shot Mango would come to the tournament. And it wasn't until about a month, maybe like 90 days prior, something like that, somewhere in that timeline, where we hit him up basically because we had confirmed with everybody else. He was like the only one left we hadn't talked to of like the super tippy top players.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, he was the easiest one to get. Basically, we're within, the next like 2 days we had already like confirmed with him and Joey and like talked about streaming on his channel. Just an amazing, amazing guy. I mean, I love Mango personally. I'd never met him before, but super nice guy. I mean, he helped us out a ton by streaming the event on our channel. But I do actually think that's like the future of like streaming melee tournaments. In a way, is having community channels, right? Because I think accessibility is a pretty hard thing for like especially grassroots TOs to like combat when it comes to the streaming side of it. And so I think having these channels like BTS Smash or even like something like Mango's channel who will just let you stream on it is like massive for TOs to not only like gain more ad revenue, but also just to have more like publicity for their events in general.
And I think because we're sort of embracing it, like somehow we're going grassroots and we're going even more grassroots. Like I think it's really cool that since most of us are actively invested in following top players and their streams, it's kind of like we're gonna see it when we pull up Twitch on a Sunday
Exactly.
and know
Yeah.
exactly where we need to go. It's not a question of is it on VGBC or BTS this time. And of course, the average fan should be following both of those channels already. Should be, but I don't know. I feel like the word of mouth somehow is able to travel around faster, easier when it's like just go to Mango Stream or just go to Cody Stream.
Hmm.
I was trying to, while you were talking about that, also try to find the final peak audience on the Twitch trackery thing, but unfortunately this is a very unintuitive website, or it's not answering the question right away. So do you know the peak viewership for Sunday on Mango's channel during top 8?
I believe we peaked around 25 to 30K on Mega's channel during top 8.
Yeah, I was thinking it was around that number as well, but I didn't want to be too far off of the mark. By far and away, best viewership for a tipped off tournament. I mean,
Absolutely.
we should probably talk about the power going off and stuff, but when you are there sitting front row, you're watching top 8 unfold and going, wow, this is awesome. I was watching Mango's stream last night. He was talking about the tournament, and he said when he woke up Sunday morning, it was really at Sunday at 1 o'clock or so, and his call time is in like very, very coming up very shortly. And he said, I messaged Chandler or Ohan, and I was basically told you have this amount of time. You don't have to be here right this second, but you will have to be here soon, kind of a thing. And he just lied there on his bed going, do I want to DQ? He going back and forth, and I'm thinking to myself, the power that somebody has just to like dramatically change the history of one tournament for top 32. Because I guess it was really cool to see top 32 go into doubles, go into top 8 singles. I know that can be tough for some of the competitors. I think of Amsa in particular, who had
Hmm.
quite a long day, but
The gauntlet. Yep.
super fun for the viewers to see, because it's like, oh, we get to see high level singles and then top level doubles and then top level singles. Oh, this is super cool. What a great day. I'm literally spending 8 hours watching Melee. This is the best thing ever. But thinking about you being there in that moment, and not that you're trying to convince Mango to come downstairs or anything, but just simply the idea of once everything fell into place, what's going through your mind as you're seeing top 4 come in and you're seeing losers finals, all that kind of stuff, as the tournament is starting to draw to a close. The viewers are going up and up. Everybody's getting building in excitement to see who's going to win the tournament. What's going through your mind?
I'm of course just like super happy. Like, there's a part of me that just gets like sucked in like the other 500 people in the crowd, and it's just like going crazy, like ultra hype. But of course, it's like I kind of have the TO responsibilities. Like I have to be thinking like, hey, okay, we have to start breaking down. Like I have to, get all the USBs out of the Wii's to upload the Slippy VODs. Like I have to, get everything out of here by midnight. I'm checking like the time to make sure we're on schedule. So it's an interesting like balancing act of like on one hand you want to just sit there and just like be honed in and just watch like the crazy hype melee that's going on literally like 5 feet in front of your face, but obligations sometimes drag me elsewhere. But I mean that's what I'm there for, right? So that the other 499 people can enjoy it and I can take care of some of the boring stuff. So
Well, there's certainly things that are going to allow you to be able to have another tournament next year. But talk to me about Saturday. So half the power goes out. You had to figure that out pretty quickly. I mean, talk to me about how that goes.
yep. So there are a few interesting things about it. So for one, we actually do not do power setup on our end. We submit floor plans and blueprints to KSU, and then the KSU AV people come in and set everything else up for us basically. So I told them exactly like how we wanted to set up and what we were going to have, and I brought up the point of essentially like, is there going to be an electrical problem? And they said like, nope, it should be fine, like totally fine. So we're about halfway through D pools, and then like bam, all the powers go out. Awful feeling, right? That's the worst noise in the entire world to a TO. So when you hear that click and then like the sighs that follow it,
The
and it's
Wii
just
Sports
it's so
crowd.
awful. Yeah, exactly. So I think in total there's about maybe 12 to 14 setups that went out in the middle of pools, which I felt super bad about on Saturday. I was like, oh, it's like I'm gonna be one of those tournaments now. Like this is gonna be one of those like tweets or Reddit posts where someone like gets the power goes out like game 3 and then they get reverse 3-0'd. It's I just didn't want it so bad. But everyone was super nice. Like all of the volunteers helped. We within about 20 minutes we were back up and running, which is huge. That outlet was just completely fried. There was nothing we could do. So we basically moved some of the setups to the friendlies room, and we kind of just had to like diversify the pools a bit more instead of having everybody in the same ballroom. So we recovered great, and I'm super appreciative for all the people that helped with that, like Jorge, like C-Tech, the MDVATO. Those guys are goated. They helped out so much with like us recovering from that. But it's just such an awful feeling. And what's funny is the day after the tournament is over, literally the Monday, they start renovations on that entire building to replace the air conditioning and the electricity and all that stuff. So I'm just like, man, like, no kidding, why couldn't it be 1 week earlier that they do that? Literally 1 week earlier. But no,
It's
like
old
the
TVs. It'll
Monday
be
after.
fine. It'll be no big deal. Old
Yeah,
TVs kind of draw more power, don't you think?
yeah,
Or at least the
exactly.
same
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I haven't done an investigation, but they correctly calculated the like TV wattage, right, to see that that wouldn't be an issue. They did not account for how much basically power the streamers would have to be using for the side stream that was plugged into the same outlet. So things like the
Mm,
lights and the cameras and all of that stuff,
yeah,
right? I
yeah.
think that's what tipped it over the edge
And a
after
computer.
the tournament had already been running for 8 hours. Yeah, I think that's what did it. So something, even though they're replacing it, something we're definitely going to look at for next year, as well as just our whole like basically tournament layout and make sure that that does not happen again, because that was an absolute nightmare.
Why do you have to be the one who's staying up? I mean, tell me specifically why it had to be you there in order to make 24-hour venue possible.
So I have a position in the KSU Esports Club. I am a game coordinator, I think is my official title. And so basically all of the reservations and booking are filled out through the KSU Esports Club.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I put it on my name, there's a specific part of the contract that I always go over with the building manager that says I have to be on site and readily available, right? So I think it's something where, if I snuck out to like Walmart, right? Like if I needed a universal remote or some AA batteries, it could be okay for like 20 minutes. But if it's something where, let's say I went to a hotel room and slept and something happened and like campus PD shows up, because campus PD is also there the whole time to make sure everything's okay. But it's just not something where I would personally risk the event like getting canceled or them kicking us out or something or terminating that contract, or not working with us next year or something because like I wanted to get 4 hours of sleep, right? I probably could get away with it in honesty, but I try to play it by the book just to make sure everything goes as good as possible. But yeah, it does specifically say that it has to be me, so it can't even I don't can't like tag in with somebody like wrestling or whatever. Like
Or
it has to be
co-signing?
me
What about
or co-signing.
co-signing?
There are no other KSU students involved with the project on that are like part of the club and stuff like that. So I'm unfortunately the only one that like does melee stuff that's like there and like willing basically
Hmm.
to sign up for that. So
Hmm. Okay, here's an idea. Now, how about you're talking about doing a 3-day event, which sounds fun, except what if you did a 1-day or 2-day event or whatever with another esport in the esports club and you say, look, I'll cover a night shift for you if you cover a night shift for me in about this time in 2024, towards the end of the school year. I mean, can we like work together on this kind of a deal? Would you consider doing that if somebody was willing to have you help them and then they would help you?
that's definitely something I'm gonna look into is like our options there. I think that now that we've basically had 2 years of tipped off there and we've had literally zero issues at all with like security or anything like that, like they've never needed me basically in the overnight hours. I think it's something to where I could definitely maybe like talk to the building manager about like, hey, is it okay if like I leave an emergency contact number and I sleep at the hotel across the street? Like I think that maybe I can like talk them into some wiggle room on that clause, given how like well the two previous events have gone. But I'll definitely be looking at all the options because that 72 hours would be really brutal. Like
That's
I
gonna
don't
be
know,
super
that
brutal.
is really hard. But
If I come down only to cover a night shift for you, Ohan, I am coming down, okay? Like, I'm not gonna stand for this because think about, I mean, how did you even sleep on Friday night going into Saturday? How'd you even do that? Because I'd be
I
too nervous to sleep. Like, that's what I'm getting at.
yeah, I actually did not sleep much Friday night. I think Friday night I got about 3 hours. Um, and it's just that's just how it is before a tournament. Like you're too anxious. What was great
Yeah.
was Saturday or Thursday was so tiring with like Six Flags and stuff like that. Where Thursday became almost my purge night, where I just like had to sleep for like 9, 10 hours. Um, And then I guess that gave me enough juice because Saturday, it was a pretty low. I was really tired. I was just walking around there like a zombie. But Sunday, once like I had my like coffee and the adrenaline kicked in, like I was ready to go. Because I didn't sleep Monday either, which is what was wild. I slept a tiny nap after the event was over, but I mean I started taking people to the hotel at like 4 a.m. in the morning, or to the airport from the hotel like 4 a.m. in the morning. So I really didn't get to sleep until after I dropped Joshua off about 6 p.m. local time on Monday, and then I finally got to rest and just disappear from this earth for like a day. So
The contract doesn't say that you have to drop people off at the airport. Where are these other people? I know that you had a lot of amazing volunteers and other TOs who showed up, to attend the tournament, also to chip in and help out, because that's grassroots, baby. Helping out with like moving everything when the power went out to the friendlies room and redoing stuff and having it back up and running within 20 minutes. I know, but can you get somebody to drop off a couple of people at the 4 a.m. airports? Woo! That is impressive. But consider doing that. Like, again, you don't really sleep on Thursday night going into Friday because Friday is the first day of the event. You don't have to think about Tipped Off 15 anyway for at least a little bit. We're only kind of like teasing the fact that you want to do it again, but you wouldn't be a student this time. How does that work?
I would still be a student by the time Tipped Off 15 happens, but I don't necessarily think that would be too much of a hiccup. So KSU has people who are part of the actual esports program, like they are paid by the university. His name is Norman, and he is the esports coordinator for the university, and he does an amazing job with that program. KSU has an amazing esports program in general. Like they are very supportive of their esports program. Like their League of Legends team is very renowned. Apparently, I don't play League of Legends, but that's what I've heard at least.
Well, they have fiber internet. They better do something with it,
Yeah, they have
because
fiber internet.
but yeah, you need fiber. If you have fiber internet, you should care about esports. That's what I'm saying. Anyway, please
Exactly.
continue.
Yeah. Yeah, but I definitely think, especially with how good these events have gone, that there probably wouldn't be much of an issue with booking it. I would maybe have to like, basically connect with someone who currently is a student there, perhaps. Um, but I mean, there's always ways you can work that out, right? But at least for Tipped Off 15, we'll be good to go. I will still be. I'm delaying my graduation essentially one semester, so I can still be a student in the summer, and then graduate in the summer of next year is currently the plan. So yeah, we should be all good on that front.
What do you do? What do you do for yourself? How are you paying the bills? What job do you have or whatever?
So I am mostly a student. I go to school full time, and then me and a bunch of other Georgia Miller Smashers, like literally 10 other Smashers, all work at the same Italian restaurant in Atlanta. It's called Pubello, and it's in Buckhead, and it's pretty hype. I mean, we're just there like playing Melee, vibing. Yeah, that's I'm a server in my spare time, so then I work on tournaments as I'm able. I've worked on a few different ones in the past year, so.
Sure, but you have a melee setup at the at this restaurant? Is that what you
All
said?
times, yeah. We lock the doors and then we put the CRT on the table and we like grind doubles until like the wee hours of the morning after the shift's over. It's pretty sick.
That's awesome. What is okay? So, what does the owner think of this, or the manager, or is the manager a melee player?
Yeah, so the general manager is the godfather of Georgia Melee, GA West. Absolute legend. I mean, he ran one of the first Georgia Melee tournaments back in like 2002. So yeah, no, he's orchestrating the whole ordeal, right? He's the ringleader. So
When you go back to the when you go back, I mean, what do you expect GA West to it'll be just well done, my son? Like what's the vibe when you go back eventually to get to do some waiting hours either later this week or whatever? What do you
yeah,
expect
it'll,
to
it'll be on
hear?
Thursday. It'll
Hmm.
be tomorrow, but no, I mean he was there. The biggest problem is when something like tipped off happens, like who runs the restaurant?
Oh
Like we
yeah.
have we have like the 3 or 4 people there who don't play Melee, right? The
Hmm.
very select few, and they're just like working doubles like every day. Like all day Thursday, all day Friday, and they're of course told way in advance, and we make sure they're all good with it. But yeah, it can get brutal when like we all went off for something like, oh, we all want to go to DreamHack Atlanta, and it's like it can get vicious with trying to get that time off for the Melee events. It's pretty crazy.
What's your favorite tournament that you've attended within the past 12 months, like going back to June of 2022?
I have not actually been to that much, so I think my favorite one besides Tipped Off 14, of course, I'd be super biased, but I enjoyed attending BIMI 2023. I worked on that tournament with Homemade Waffles, and that was such a unique experience and unique like atmosphere. That tournament was absolutely just like phenomenal work that like the whole production team did and everything like that. Phil Nolan, Brando, all those guys, they're
Yeah,
such
let's go,
legends.
Brando. Brando's a friend of the
Yeah,
program.
Brando's hype. I think besides that, my favorite tournament I attended probably as just a player was Warehouse War 2, which was a regional event up in Nashville, Tennessee by Tyler Cox. His tag's Rooster. Great TO, like great vibes all around. My boy Colin Cobol won. And so
Oh,
that was like, of
nice.
course, sick to watch in person. We got second in doubles, which was also super hype. So yeah, that was just a sick event. And I love like the regional atmosphere to it, and kind of that regional atmosphere is something we always try to like mimic at Tipped Off. Like no matter how many like top like high end players there are, I think that vibe is something very, very important to these events.
In order to capture the regional feel, instead of going for crew battles, this time you went for the Boomer bracket and the Mushroom Kingdom 2 charity bracket. Can we talk about
Mhm.
those? Because I would like to hear what's the age bracket for Boomer? Are we only talking about you can only play as characters that have bombs that go boom? I'm confused and I would like to be filled in, please.
Yep. So the Mushroom Kingdom 2 bracket has always been a tradition of Tipped Off. I'm not sure which Tipped Off it started. I don't think it was at the first one, but basically all of the recent Tipped Offs for the past like 8 years
It's a great
have had,
stage.
yeah, the Mushroom Kingdom 2 only bracket, and it used to actually be legal in tournament. Like that was the Tipped
Yes.
Off creation. So Tipped Off 7, where PPMD won infamously, the last game was on Mushroom Kingdom 2, which was pretty sick. Um, but no, and then we had the Boomer bracket. So this was a funny idea that's like kind of been like joked around in like the Georgia Melee, and I think just in the Smash community in general. Um, and so it's something we wanted to do. So we had it be you had to be 30 plus. Like we literally checked IDs at the door. You had to be 30 plus to get into this bracket.
No, Ochi
Um,
kid, get lost. Okay,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
exactly.
He
He
wasn't
actually
not.
signed up
Yeah.
for it by accident though, which was what was funny. He had to email me and get me to remove it. But yeah, no, we checked IDs and then we ran the Evo 2007 rule set. So we had like all like the bullshit stages, like Brinstar, Poke Floats, Green Greens. We did like the old school like striking method where like you each would ban one stage and then random the remaining ones, which was just like
Oh,
ultra cursed, right? It's so
yes. I
cursed.
love that.
And then grand finals was played with 5 stocks instead of 4 stocks, which apparently was also the standard like back in ye olden days. So
Yep, the earliest melee that I know that I've watched. I mean, even just from the documentary, it's like 5 stocks, 5 stocks. The Punish
yeah,
game was
exactly.
not as refined, or
hmm
maybe they just liked having 5 because that was a nice round number.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I think it's interesting like how we extend the game by like basically the like game count, right? You go best of 3, best of 5, or we do like an exhibition that's a best of 10. Where back then they elected instead to actually use the in-game like stock count, right, and change it to, and they have 5, 6, 7 stocks. I've even seen it's pretty interesting, like how the philosophy has changed over time. But most importantly is we had to sneak the Boomer bracket in this year. We knew it because Cobalt didn't turn 30 for another month. He turns 30 in July, so we had to sneak that one in right before while he was still 29, and cut him out of that whole deal. So,
What was it like carrying Caldwell to a second place finish at Warehouse Wars 2?
it's par for the course at this point. I've been carrying him for a long time now. We have the spoken agreement where I take 80% of the team's money. He only gets 20%. So, it's like I make sure I get my fair share, proportionate to my effort, of course. And it shows, he teams with Harriet the Guy. He gets bodied by a team we've never lost to before. And, I don't know. He's probably in he's probably in my messages right now. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe I'll get back to him if I'm feeling like it.
So tell me about who you play in the game and why you like playing that character.
So I play Fox McCloud,
Mm,
as a lot of people do, right?
as you
And I,
do.
I don't know, I just like him a lot. I think that Fox gives like a lot of like unique options and like movement options. Of course, he's a little broken. I think initially when I was like, a like strictly like spectator, like media consumer person, I was like, oh well, Fox is the best, and I like the concept of like when I lose, it always being my fault, basically, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
while that is like kind of like a noob mentality, like that is what like got me on the boat initially, right? And I think that perhaps like helped me with like some it helped me like skip some perhaps mental issues that I think a lot of like new players get into, where they think like, oh, like my character isn't good enough, right? Like I'm a Peach player, but maybe I need to like pick up Fox or like Marth or something. I just got to bypass that by being like, nope, Fox is broken. I'm just bad.
But instead of complaining about characters as much, I feel like the primary complaint nowadays is the controller stuff. My controllers is what is holding me back. So, talk to me about talk to me about the controllers that you may or may not have tried, used. What is your thought on the controller landscape of 2023?
Whew, oh, I'm gonna get twit longer about this one. No, I think the controller like dynamic is not in like the worst state it's ever been. I think that I once talked with Practical Taz about this, and this was pretty interesting. Where I'm of the opinion that the difference between the best controller and the worst controller now is greater than the difference between the best controller and the worst controller in like the pre-UCF era, right? Which is like insane to think about. Um, but I don't know. I really just wish, like, very simply, I just wish there was more regulation about it. Like, there isn't really like a body that like kind of does that sort of thing anymore, that like makes rules for like the scene as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think it's definitely weird, especially with stuff like rectangles, where it's like every controller can like be balanced to like a different extent, and there's no like standardized options for it. And I also think there's very few like tools for TOs to kind of like work about this and deal with this. Or it's like if someone does update their box or their frame one to have like an insane, option or like some different angle, I really can't even like check it in any like really, meaningful way.
Then that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that they don't want. There's nobody who wants to be the person who gets all the backlash for saying them's the rules, and then enforcing it seems like an
Hmm.
even greater thing, a bigger task. It's almost like you have to like plug each of them in one by one, test them, and be like, I'm a controller expert. No, I'm a TO, and I just want to run a tournament. Why are you all bringing in
Yeah,
these wonky,
exactly.
crazy controllers? Stop it.
I think in a perfect world, what I'd like to have happen, and I don't even know how like feasible this is, but it's where at the registration desk, if you had a rectangle or something, right, or really any controller, like let's say it was even something like a Goomwave or a Fob, there'd be like an approved patch of like that software, and there'd be some application where I could like plug in the box to my PC with like the GameCube controller adapter, and then it would like basically confirm for me on the software and that it has like the correct patch, right?
Yeah.
And things of that nature, right? And I don't know how realistic that is. I know there's been like talks about that, but I do think that's something that'd be like immensely helpful if we ever did try and fight the crusade of like standardizing controllers, because right now like there's no possible way at tipped off that myself or even probably like the opponents of these players could know if someone was playing on like pre-nerf box, unless there's someone like very very educated and
Mm-hmm.
like the specifics of that controller,
Right.
which just isn't, it's just not, it's just not a fair requirement for your opponent to have to be educated on the dynamic layout of every single controller under the sun that's like available to the community.
And I think the big thing is the fracturing part where different people want different outcomes in regards to controller discourse. So there's going to be something that happens that will eventually get enough people on one boat to steer the community in a certain direction. But I think what that occurrence will be is someone winning a tournament on a box that's actually a big enough tournament. Shout outs to Pipsqueak for winning. I think it was Low Tide
Hmm.
City, not
Yep.
Lost. No, Manga won Lost Tech City. I think Pipsqueak won
Low Tide
Low
City
Tide City.
over,
Yeah.
I think it was over Mech and Axe and
Yep.
people of that
Yep.
nature. So,
And so that was the thing. It's like you can't even call that a Mickey Mouse major. That was just a regional, Yeah.
hmm.
So congratulations to Pipsqueak, but if it were a bigger event like Big House 10, if Gatsu on the Smashbox won that event,
Yeah.
that would be woo. Look at can
I do
we
think that
rally
was,
around it?
I do think that's something that a lot of people thought would be the rallying point, but I'm not too sure anymore, honestly, because I know some box players and I kind of hear a lot of the discourse around it. And I honestly feel like it's just goalpost moving. Like for a long time, it was, oh well, there's only like hacks at the top with on a rectangle, right? And then it was,
Ooh,
oh
true.
well, there's only these two guys, and oh now there's like these five people, but they're not making top 16, and then oh well they're not making top 8, and oh well now they're not beating top players. Well then Pipsqueak beats Mango, and you're like, oh well he's not winning the event. Like I really don't think that by the time you get to the end of the rainbow, like the pot of gold is going to be all that valuable. And I don't think it's fair either. I don't think it's fair to wait for someone to get super good at a controller and perhaps like come to the full potential of perhaps the controller's flaws for then that person to be punished and that controller to be like banned or something like that, right? Like
That's also
I
true.
kind of wish people had a more objective viewpoint where you can just like look at what a controller does, right? Or like some of the information about it and come to a decision rather than having to have the let's see argument and then, at the end of the day, like somebody's going to get screwed over because of it, right?
That is true. Regardless of what happens now, if any sort of community wide, this is what we're doing, someone's going to be super upset about it. So the time to quote unquote avoid hurt feelings would have been as soon as it started to roll out. So I guess
For
we are
sure.
just kind of waiting for the box bubble to pop. Whew.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing is, and you were talking about the moving the goalposts. I like that concept, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm also thinking it seems to be difficult to win a tournament in the first place. Obviously, you get to a certain level, and you can't, me or you or even Pipsqueak can expect to attend a tournament that has at least Zane and Mango and Hungrybox and Jmook and Moki now, and expect to win that tournament. You're going to go, probably not going to beat the combination of those players. So maybe it is kind of the idea that no one started immediately taking over and making it seem obvious that the controller was the difference. Maybe even though there's certain things that the box can do really well, the Smash box having like nine modifier buttons and keys, and like nobody wants to see macros, of course, but I don't think that the list of people who are actively using macros in order to achieve perfect angles on ledge dashing, Peach ledge dashes, or I don't think that that's quite happening just yet. We're just achieving like the button presses required to get there. Travel time is also an interesting concept to me,
For
like
sure.
nerfing travel, but to tie a bow on it, since nothing has happened in regards to a group of people coming together and saying, we'll take the flack for it, we've come up with a super duper fair rule set, and here's the way to legislate that at tournaments. I think that's the reason why you haven't seen it yet, and you probably won't see it for a while, because it is very difficult to do both of those things at the same time.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a really hard thing for TOs like like the unpaid like TO people never want to pick the fight with controller overlords, right? It's just not going to be a winning battle or a fun battle for anybody. But there's definitely a witch hunt mentality about it. I'm not sure if you know or remember this, but I in Georgia banned the Goom Wave like pretty shortly after it came out, right? I mean, it was mainly due to their pretty what I thought was shady business tactics, but I got so much slack for it from people who didn't even live in the state of Georgia. Like they'd never been to a Georgia tournament, they had never done whatever. But I just got so blasted for it on Twitter, and in the end, like it turned out they were having some pretty shady business tactics, and I was kind of right about that. But yeah, I mean, there's just always people that are like willing to start that discourse and be ultra toxic over controller stuff, and I just think like most TOs like just don't have time for that or the energy for that, and so until there's probably something more standardized, I wouldn't expect much development on that front.
Let's see. We are over an hour now for the recording, and I don't want to hold you up for too much longer, but I think the last thing probably has to do with sorry, kind of this idea of how you think Melee is going to be in, say, 5 years, and what your involvement will be. I always am interested in hearing not a job interview, where's your life going to be in 10 years type thing, but you can either say, what do you think your role within Melee will be in a 5-year jump, or what do you think Melee will be at a place in a 5-year jump? I'm curious to hear what you think the big direction Melee is going in. And no, it does not have to be controller related. You can pick a different vein.
I think in the next coming years we'll see a big move from kind of what we have known as far as like tournaments in the structure to something much more grassroots, right? I think we had this kind of idea where there was going to be like circuits and like be on the summit, like hundreds of $1,000s in prize money. And then especially with like how esports is right now, I just don't think that's what the future has in store for us, unfortunately.
Aside
But
from
I don't
Ludwig.
I don't yeah, aside from Ludwig, right? But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the problem isn't how the tournaments are. I think the problem is people's expectations, right? I don't think every tournament needs a stage. I don't think every tournament needs, the fog machine and the, LED lighting and stuff like that. I think at the end of the day, like we're all here because 20 years ago, someone in probably a church somewhere like just played Melee on like a really tiny microwave CRT on a GameCube and it was probably hot and there was no AC. And because of that, we're now, on the big stage or whatever, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with returning back to that same church and playing more Melee, right? They're just different things, and I understand, people like certain things about all of them, but I just really hope, I guess, in the next 5 years, people kind of take that step to try and like relate more to like literally our roots, right? Literally the grassroots scene, and I think that that's what the future of Melee has for us right now. I definitely think if we support RTOs both locally, regionally, we just keep playing Melee, we actually like show up and interact with our community, I think we'll be amazed at what we can do in the next 5 years when it comes to our tournament scene.
And long live regionals.
Yeah, long live regionals for sure.
I've definitely fallen more in love with regionals that I've both attended and watched. There's great storylines that you can find, and the vibes are more unique. It is there was a time in 2022 where some of the big boy tournaments felt like copy and paste. I'd say I'd say not that it was all one to one equal. There were reasons that they were slightly different from each other, but they did feel formulaic to a certain point. That was getting dangerously formulaic, I should say. But you did have some great tournaments last year, and we'll miss people like Beyond the Summit because that was truly a unique experience from some of these other super majors that would happen. But you can capture some of the things that we all liked about a summit tournament event either by having an invitational, like MDVA had an invitational tournament in an Airbnb house and they did it summit style, or if you want to do like, I don't think we're super big into skits for a specific tournament, but if you wanted to do that, you could. In other words, if you say I miss this about the tournaments of times past, maybe all it takes is you saying, "Oh, I could do something like that." In 717, we have a tournament where the food is free and registration is free, and it only happens once a month. But I wish it happened almost every other day because I am a big fan of free food. So shouts out to Clavicle in the garage, who it's in a garage, but the Mama Clav and Papa Clav are very nice to all the gamers that show up, and it's a super fun time, and it gives you the best feeling that Melee can give you, which is a community that all kind of believes in keeping the environment safe and welcoming, and we're playing sick Melee. So, Ohan, this has been super good to have you on. It was amazing to watch Tipped Off 14 as a I would not describe myself as a stream monster because I have wife and children and I got stuff going on, but I was trying to pay attention to top 32 as much as I could throughout the day Sunday. And then when we got home and the kids were in bed, I said to Jen, Melee's going on the TV tonight. And that's just how it's gonna be. She fell asleep and I was just like going try not to move too much. It was very, very fun. Top 32, top four dubs, and then top eight singles. You had so many great matches that happened, and you don't necessarily say, I have to have Mango reverse 3-0 AMSA in order for my tournament to work. But by golly, you got the tournament to work, and you got a Mango reverse 3-0 on AMSA. You got Moki in AMSA game 5. You got to see a little bit of a baby resurgence from Mango in general, and you got to see Zane with a nice dominant finish, including beating Peach, which I would not say is a problem matchup for Zane, but it's always fun when you consider the Zane that can run through spacies, getting to Winterside Grands really easily, versus being tripped up by a Sheik or Peach or
Mhm.
or maybe not another Marth because Kadoran can't challenge Zane at the moment. But I always feel like Zane getting different characters is more vulnerable than Zane getting a pure Spacies bracket. So I was very
For sure.
interested. Will Polish be able to pull this off? Just not Polish's day. But seeing Zane take that W and see the amazing pictures that came out of that, you hired the right photographers to take pictures of this event. All the pictures that have come out of it have been super awesome to see. Everybody seems to be having a great time. That's because of you and the team. So thank you very much for putting on Tipped Off 14.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it was an amazing event. Like so many awesome people helped out with it, and I'm super excited already for a tipped off 15. Yeah, I might take a little bit of some time
Oh,
off
of course.
over these next 2 or 3 months, but I mean, hey, it's not too long out before I have to start booking the venue again. So before
Mm.
you know it, you'll hear about it. So
Well, in a public scale, it'll be a minute. It'll be a minute. But yeah, you do have to get to it in a couple of months. Enjoy your time studenting in the summer and in the fall and in the spring. Thank you so much for being willing to do that. That's awesome. And any final shout outs and plugs before we get you going here?
definitely shouts to everybody who watched or attended the tournament. Shout outs to Polarity GG. I know we streamed on Mango's channel, so they probably don't get enough credit, but I mean they're insanely good at their jobs with production and streaming of that tournament. They streamed like Evo, and then just like also just huge shout outs to like the whole Southeastern Georgia Melee. We haven't had a major tournament in of this caliber probably ever, and probably in about 22 years. So it was super duper duper hype to see that everybody came up and kind of participated in the event and like made it theirs in some way.
So let's go ahead and say goodbye to the people. We'll do the outro, which is another 25 seconds of awkward silence. And then I have just like a thumbnail pose for the YouTube thumbnail. And then we're actually done. But yes, thank you everybody for tuning in.